There is still the assumption that all the clouds are flat, and they all do the same things, and they're not. There is notable, you know, double-digit percentage points difference in latency of the same calls made from AWS versus the same calls made from Azure. And I think that's something Microsoft should perhaps pay more attention to. And I think the underpinning behind that is there is still clearly, no matter how we look at the details, and people talk about hybrid cloud and multi-homing for data centers, there is still a bias to AWS Region 1. And a lot of the world's cloud services still kind of live in Virginia. And I think it's interesting that, what are we 5-6 years into doing this analysis, and that hasn't really changed. And I was expecting it to change, and people talk about it changing, but I'm not sure it is.
And what does that mean for performance?
I think it means that people have to be cognizant of where they are hosting. If they're hosting somewhere outside of the East Coast, there will be a performance overhead. The speed of light is finite. Switches and traffic management and all sorts of other things add latency. If you have if you are dependent on latency for your customer experience, you're better off hosting your solutions close to where the solutions you depend on are hosted, and actually verifying what the routing looks like and how performant it is. We are adding more tools to help people do that, but it's certainly something that I don't think architects and designers and API product managers pay enough attention to. They just go along. It feels like they're going with the flow with, oh, well, we're in Azure shop and this is we got a good price to host everything here, but they're still not looking at, well, what does that actually mean for our end users? And I think that's the location of the services you connect to and what they're hosted on is part of a matrix of decisions you want to take, rather than just, well, we do everything on Azure and I click deploy on this box and that's where it lives. It feels like there's a lot of default behaviors in terms of deploying applications still, that I think people ought to be a little bit more, what's the word I'm thinking? I need to come up with a good word for this, a little bit more deliberative about, rather than this is how it's always been done and this is how it works. And I think people need to really think about that.
I mean, that David, is related to the fact that nobody ever lost their job by buying IBM. That a lot of these kind of key stakeholders, key decision makers, just don't want to be seen as doing anything that isn't just completely vanilla, so that they, if they can say to their boss, well, everybody uses AWS Virginia, and then they say, well, what happened when AWS Virginia gets knocked out by the EM pulse and you're completely snookered?
Well, everybody will be knocked out. We can chat about it in the cave.
Well, that's how you're going to justify it, but that's not really a good enough explanation, is it? Because it's like, you want, actually it isn't secure to put every single service in the world, or a very high percentage of them, as you've said, in one place. We needed, a distributed architect, federated architecture, David.
For the 4th year in a row, it was the fastest cloud location.
Well, I think that's also indicating that it's fastest because that's what most of the services people depend on live. So, but that's actually, to Paul's point, that is actually a terrible potential single point of failure. That there's so much dependency on that location. So it's certainly something, if Amazon has another bad day, everybody will have a bad day, whether they want to have one or not.